Well, in case you didn't know, Canada's continuing its descent into Trudeau's dystopian, authoritarian future. So let's take a look at what's happening here. This is from Jordan Peterson. He's saying, breaking. The Ontario College of Psychologists has demanded that I submit myself to mandatory social media communication retraining with their experts for, among other crimes, retweeting Pierre Poilievre and criticizing Justin Trudeau and his political allies. Well, that's just the sort of thing that Justin Trudeau would love. But this is what happens when you have ideological capture of institutions. After the ideological capture happens, nothing really matters. Public pressure doesn't really matter. The radicals have taken over, and they don't care what anybody else thinks. And anybody in the institution that isn't a radical doesn't dare say that they're not a radical. They have to be a coward and pretend that they are or that they agree. Otherwise, the radicals are going to turn on them. They're going to make them go to mandatory social media communication retraining. Wow, that sounds just like re-education, doesn't it? Yeah, again, because once the radicals are in control, there's no longer going to be any debate anymore. No, there is one true way, and it's whatever they say today. And if they change their mind tomorrow, well, that's the new true way. Anyway, let's take a quick look at the website for the College of Psychologists of Ontario. They're demanding here that we must all work together to do better. Sounds like a Marxist slogan, doesn't it? That's not a big surprise, is it? And of course, they have a page for equity, diversity, and inclusion. That's just an automatic these days. And at this point, I mean, we don't need to belabor the point, but it just means ideological conformity. That's all they mean by that. Because, of course, if you're a minority, but you're not a radical leftist, they don't have any time for you. But I did find something here I thought you might find amusing. I did. Under their definition of the word inclusion, it says it involves removal of barriers, e.g. physical, procedural, visible, invisible, invisible, intentional, and of course, unintentional. Because, of course, intention actually doesn't matter. But I like how they just say it openly here. Let's see. Invisible. The invisible barriers. The ones that you don't even know are there. In fact, you wouldn't even know they're there unless, I guess, the College of Psychologists of Ontario tell you. Kind of makes you wonder how much you should actually pay attention to the College of Psychologists of Ontario. But I guess if you're a psychologist, you have to, because they can take away your license. And here, I guess this is in regards to his forthcoming re-education. I am to take a course of such training with reports documenting my progress or face an in-person tribunal and suspension of my right to operate as a licensed clinical psychologist. About a dozen people from all over the world submitted complaints about my public statements on Twitter and I guess the Joe Rogan Show over a 4-year period out of the 15 million people who follow me on social media, claiming that I had harmed people, not them, with my views. In its wisdom, CP Ontario decided to pursue these complaints, even though they could have dismissed them as vexatious. I have been accused of harming people, although none of the complainants involved in the current action were clients of mine, past or present, or were even acquainted with any of my clients. So people who have absolutely nothing to do with anything. But let's not forget, according to the College of Psychologists of Ontario, we must all work together to do better. I guess this is what they're talking about? Just anybody in the world who doesn't like Jordan Peterson? I don't know, this all feels a little bit disingenuous to me. Or maybe to use a clinical term, retarded. Let's see, and even though many of them falsely claimed that they were or had been clients of mine, and were allowed by CP Ontario to have their complaints investigated despite this falsehood. So they know that the complainants are liars, and they don't care. Because we must all work together to do better. We are now in a situation in Canada under Justin Trudeau where practicing professionals can have their livelihoods and public reputations threatened in a very serious manner for agreeing with the official opposition and criticizing major government figures. Anyway, it continues, if I comply, the terms of my re-education and my punishment will be announced publicly. I've already had the second most serious category of punishment levied against me and have been deemed at high risk to re-offend. Canadians, your physicians, lawyers, psychologists, and other professionals are now so intimidated by their commissar overlords that they fear to tell you the truth. This means that your care and legal counsel has been rendered dangerously unreliable. To reiterate, I face public disgrace, mandatory political re-education, a disciplinary hearing, and potential loss of my clinical licensing for agreeing with Pierre Poilievre and criticizing our standing PM, Justin Trudeau. I am willing, if CP Ontario concurs, which they won't, to make absolutely every word of all of this fully public so that everyone can decide for themselves what is actually happening. Yes, and of course they're not going to want this to be public. That's not how they do things. They prefer to do things in the shadows where nobody's paying attention. That's how they got their positions in the first place. That's how they've taken over basically every institution in the West. Now, obviously, Jordan Peterson is not going to cave to the Ontario College of Psychologists. And I'm sure at this point, Jordan Peterson can afford to lose his license to be a psychologist in Ontario if it comes to that. But that's not the point. The point is, what about the people that can't? That's what this is about. The Ontario College of Psychologists has apparently been taken over by radical leftists, and they don't like sharing power. In fact, they don't like justifying what they do. In fact, they don't like hearing anything from you at all, unless it's you chanting a slogan that they gave you in the first place. So, as always, this isn't just an attack on one person. It's an attack on anybody who would dissent. And don't forget, we must all work together to do better. Yeah, I'm just not sure that their vision of better is actually better. Anyway, please subscribe, like, and share. Sharing really helps me out. I thank you for that. I will see you next time.